Hey everyone, thanks for coming. I'm going to be talking about making cloud security more human. I am here on behalf of Block. I'm a security engineer. So I'm going to briefly talk about the story, why I'm here, what we did, and the results, but I'm going to mostly focus on some core principles that helped us along the way and some guidelines to share with you. So why I'm here, we wanted to remove static keys, which is a problem that a lot of companies have. We wanted to reduce our risks. And along the way, we learned a lot. And I wanted to share some tips. So I wanted to present because security is not really it's not so much a technical challenge. It's really a people and process challenge. And it's about how achieving a secure environment is not about how many controls you have, but it's about how good your process is, because users will always find a way around them, and it's going to be a lot worse than what you were blocking before, because now they're doing something worse. So you would actually be more secure by just removing whatever you're trying to block. What is a static key? A good example is an API token. You just download it from a vendor. It lives on your laptop. I'm going to focus on access keys and GCP service account keys here, but there's other kinds. So just a brief background, why does it matter? So there's some risks with static keys. Generally speaking, they live forever, and they could be used by anyone, anywhere. And there's some guardrails you can put around that. But generally speaking, this is true. And every time you remove a key, you're tangibly reducing your risk. So if they're risky, then why do they exist? It's because people need them. So there is a time and a place for static keys. They're not inherently bad. But in 2024, there's a lot of other options. 10 years ago, it was kind of your only option. So deleting the keys is really easy. It's 7 clicks in AWS. But it's not a technical problem, like I said. Getting people to care, getting people to migrate and stop what they're doing. They're in the middle of a sprint. You have 1,000 teams doing work. You got to get them to care. So people use them because they need them. So there's some alternatives I'm going to briefly talk about. There's not only 3, but I'm just going to focus on these for now. So first alternative is federation. You've probably heard of that. In this context, it's just translating from one credential provider to another, like the common use case is AWS to GCP. You're trading some kind of credential for another credential. And the crux of this is that it's temporary. So you're passing off the problem of handling credentials to someone else, which is great. There's also role assumption. So you might have used assume role. Even if you don't know about it, you use it because it's under the hood of everything. Common use case here is going from account to account. You have a role, and then you create a trust policy, and then you assume the other role. And then another one I want to mention is this relatively new service called IAM Roles Anywhere. Essentially, you use certificates to trade for temporary credentials. So you set up a trust anchor, like a trusted CA. You could use private CA. And you use your certificates and you get temporary credentials. And the cool thing is that if you have hybrid cloud workloads, like on-prem servers, you don't need a static key anymore. You could just use certificates. And we use this a lot. So this allowed us to get rid of a lot of keys. And then some project management stuff we did, I'm going to skip for time, but you all know this. Basically, just have a good plan. We also made a lot of user-facing documentation, like wikis, obviously, but also technical documentation, migration guides, decision trees. We communicated with users because a common complaint that we didn't get, but I've heard, is that they don't feel like they're included. But the thing I want to focus on is the Terraform modules and automation we did. So one thing I'm allowed to talk about is we created these Terraform modules that basically users can just drop in, and then it generates all the things they need for federation. So they don't have to think, they don't have to read anything. They could just drop it in and be done. We also made a key deletion service which safely deletes keys. It has a bunch of safeguards in place so that we can pass it whatever keys we want, and we know that anything it deletes is what should be deleted. And then I'll just briefly talk about some results. So in less than a year's work, we've massively reduced the amount of keys we have. I'm not allowed to say more than this, but it's a big reduction. So I want to focus on some core principles that might help you if you're experiencing either this problem or any kind of other migration, because this is not specific to static keys. So I'm going to go over each of these. The first one is, don't be at odds with your customers. You should know who your customers are. In our case, it's every cloud user at Block, which is almost everyone at the company. But just because you work inside a company doesn't mean you don't have customers. If you treat them as if you own a business, you wouldn't put roadblocks and other things in their way, right? You want them to buy and use your services and products. So treat them as if you own a business. And put yourself in their shoes. They don't have all the context that you have. You're the expert and not them. And most importantly, you should understand their needs. They just want to get their work done. They just want to ship code. They don't want to think about policies or controls, and they don't care about that. Second principle is to enable the business. We want to be secure, but the business needs to make money, and that's always going to be the top priority. So how can we do both? If you go back to the CIA triad, you can have maximum confidentiality if you just unplug your servers. Then we don't have any availability. So you always have to have a balance. And developers might want to do a lot of stuff that might be risky or stupid, but our job is to let them do that because we have to enable the business. And that's it. Our job is not to make controls or tools or policies. Those are just things that we do along the way to accomplish our goal of enabling the business. Last principle is don't tick off checkboxes. So users are not going to care about your controls or your requirements or policies, and I don't think that they should. They shouldn't have to read a policy to understand what to do and what not to do. That should just be done for them with something like automation. So some contrived example is you have an ELA, but the application lets you do whatever you want to do. That doesn't make any sense. And yet we still build security tools like that, right? And we have infrastructure like that where we expect users to read policies. So that doesn't make any sense. You should also care about what users are building. So you should be involved in their design reviews. You should get involved before something is created. And you should offer meaningful expertise. So when a security team comes to you for advice, you shouldn't just say, you shouldn't do this because of security reasons. So some guidelines in no particular order. Be data-driven. So don't guess, don't estimate. We created services to get the data analysis that we actually needed because it made sense. And if we didn't have the data, then we wouldn't know what the problem is or how to justify the work that we're doing and quantify the impact that we had. And also it told us where the impact was. So another thing is don't make annoying alerts. We all know that alerts can be annoying, but they're especially annoying for users. They should always be actionable. If they're not actionable, then they're going to be just a checkbox. So if you send a misconfig alert, let's say you have like Lambda code signing is not enabled or something like that, you should say why it matters, what's the risk, what's the alternatives, how do you fix it. But one step further is just make automation that, let's say, makes a pull request to fix that issue for them. And that's how you can scale up. Don't put things off. So the longer you wait, the worse it's going to be. One example is the American electrical grid. So in America, we use 110 to be pedantic. 105 to 125-ish is nominal. But anyway, 110 we get to the outlet here. In Europe, it's 220. And that's objectively better. It's safer to deliver the same amount of power with more voltage. You have half the fire risk. You can also supply more power in the same circuit. So if it's better, why don't we use it? And the short answer is that it's just too late. We have so much tech debt. Like we have 120 years of tech debt in our electrical grid. So compare that to your backlog next time you think that you have a lot of tech debt. And it's not a technical problem. You have like the laws, the fire codes, education, training, inspections, all of that stuff that you would have to do and change just to migrate. And at this point, it's just too late because we waited too long. And if you put off migrations that you might think are too much work now, just wait 3 years. You have, either there's just too much work to do now, or everyone who had the institutional knowledge left, and then you're stuck, and then you can't migrate. 80/20 comes up a lot. I'm sure you've seen it. In our data, we were able to get some quick wins by we analyzed our data and we found that 80% of our issues were caused by a small subset of customers, and we were able to focus on them. But don't obsess about getting to 100, because if you make a solution that might not reach every single edge case, you're not going to get anywhere and you're not going to do anything. So just focus on 80%, it's good enough, and then focus on the last 10, 20%, which will take up most of your time. Once you identified the biggest consumers, you should target them. What we did is we found that basically like fewer than 5 people, teams were responsible for 80% or so of keys. We were able to work with them one-on-one, understand their code base, help them make actual changes. Everyone else can leverage your automation, your documentation, all that stuff, and migrate at their own pace. And then a note on service is sometimes teams will come to you for advice, and if you give them some boilerplate answer about security policy, whatever, you're basically training them not to come talk to you. So you should leave them in a better place than they started off. Leverage the tools you have. So we used Wiz a lot. We used dashboards. We created some services when it made sense, not just because, but it made sense for us. So don't be afraid to build if you need to. And leverage automation as much as you can, because that's how you scale. And then last thing is the shared responsibility model for vendors. So this is kind of my thing. If you have a vendor and they don't support some kind of federation, then you should work with them to implement that, because you're not just a customer, you're also their partner. So you should make high priority requests that they implement that. You should also have some kind of vendor process, like we have VenSec to determine like the risks of a new vendor. And if it's not worth it, the vendor should know why so that they can improve it. Okay, that's it.
All right, thanks, Alon.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.